Alberta air quality advisories from BC wildfire smoke and federal carbon plan signals for oil patch operations require immediate review of monitoring protocols and emission inventories for Western Canadian sites. This is Environmental Intelligence, Episode 62. Southern Alberta recorded extremely poor air quality from BC wildfire smoke transport, directly affecting ambient monitoring at contaminated sites in Lethbridge and Mountain View County. The federal announcement frames future support mechanisms for oil patch operations without releasing new numeric thresholds or amendments to C-CPA. Ontario restoration planning on forested lands now incorporates climate projections for species selection, while Powerwood Canada advances biofuel conversion of wildfire-damaged timber in BC and Alberta. If you only note one thing today for your compliance calendar, review air quality monitoring data releases for southern Alberta sites affected by BC smoke while mapping emission inventories against the federal direction. Canada's Energy Minister stated that the federal carbon plan will provide future support to the oil patch. The announcement positions carbon management as a long-term compliance and operational tool rather than an immediate cost driver. Previous federal approaches emphasized pricing alone. This framing signals potential offsets or transition funding tied to existing facilities. Practitioners managing oil sands or conventional upstream sites in Alberta and Saskatchewan should map current emission inventories against the plan's stated direction. Next steps include watching for detailed program design documents that define eligible activities and reporting thresholds. No specific effective dates or new regulatory text were released. Alberta and Saskatchewan sites with flare pits or produced water ponds face the clearest near-term need to test remedial options against possible future credit mechanisms. The federal announcement was described as providing future assistance to oil patch activities without new numeric thresholds or immediate amendments to CEPA or provincial acts. This means operators should continue existing reporting while preparing for potential new offset or credit mechanisms. Alberta upstream sites already subject to EPEA emission tracking now have an additional forward-looking variable to incorporate into remedial options analyses. Southern Alberta, including Lethbridge and Mountain View County, recorded extremely poor air quality linked to BC wildfire smoke. No new regulatory orders were issued, but the data directly affect ongoing ambient monitoring programs and worker exposure assessments at sites. Mountain View County air quality is projected to improve by Heritage Day, providing a defined endpoint for heightened exposure controls. Restoration planning in Northern Ontario now explicitly incorporates climate change projections for species selection and site preparation. The approach shifts from historical reference ecosystems toward forward-looking resilience criteria. Practitioners conducting risk assessments or closure planning on forested contaminated sites in Ontario should integrate similar forward climate parameters into vegetation and soil cover designs. Powerwood Canada is positioning wildfire-damaged timber as feedstock for renewable biofuel production. The strategy converts otherwise low-value burned material into an energy resource while reducing on-site disposal or open burning. Site assessors in BC and Alberta should evaluate whether timber harvest or biofuel conversion alters soil disturbance assumptions in existing remediation or reclamation plans. Mountain View County air quality is expected to improve by Heritage Day following BC wildfire smoke transport. The event underscores the need for real-time regional data integration into site health and safety plans and vapor intrusion assessments. Alberta operators with active vapor or ambient programs now have a concrete example of how cross-border smoke events override local baseline data. Consider an upstream facility assessment where historical flare pits are noted but carbon pricing assumptions remain fixed through 2030. The federal announcement introduces the possibility of new offset or transition mechanisms that could alter net liability calculations. Under current EPEA and federal reporting, sites must already track direct emissions. The plan's forward-looking language suggests future credits may be tied to remediation activities that reduce long-term fugitive sources. Experienced assessors recognize that carbon cost sensitivity often appears first in the remedial options analysis rather than the site characterization phase. The practical step is to request the client's current emission inventory and any internal carbon price assumptions before finalizing the remedial plan. Alberta EPEA annual reporting already requires quantification of methane and volatile organic compound releases from ponds and pits. Adding a carbon price sensitivity layer tests whether monitored natural attenuation becomes more attractive than excavation when offset credits are available. The mistake I see most often is treating carbon pricing as an external financial overlay applied after the environmental report is complete. The fix is to include a simple sensitivity table in the options analysis that tests 2 or 3 carbon price scenarios against excavation, in situ, and monitored natural attenuation alternatives. If you are working on oil patch remediation and reclamation cost estimates, review the federal announcement language for implications on those figures. Update site monitoring plans in southern Alberta to incorporate regional wildfire smoke data when assessing ambient conditions. Brief clients on Ontario climate-adapted forest restoration approaches for projects involving vegetated cover systems. Monitor the biofuel initiative for potential soil disturbance or waste classification changes at wildfire-affected sites. Track any follow-up guidance on federal measures affecting Alberta and Saskatchewan upstream sites. Review ongoing air quality advisories for BC and Alberta regions through the current wildfire season. Assess integration of climate projections into Northern Ontario site closure plans on forested land. Evaluate biofuel feedstock strategies for wildfire-damaged timber in BC and Alberta reclamation programs. That's environmental intelligence for today. If this briefing is useful to your practice, share it with a colleague and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back with the next briefing. Have a productive day. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at NERA Network. Links in the show notes. This show comes to you from the NERA Network. If you want another sharp daily briefing, SpaceX Daily has you covered, the daily companion for following SpaceX as a public company, from Starship to the stock ticker. All our shows are free at neranetwork.com, and on the website, every episode's visuals live in our free image gallery at neranetwork.com gallery. Royalty-free under Creative Commons. Download with attribution. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.